Did you know that you can just become a furry artist? You can just do this like whenever you want. Variety of approaches, but yeah, like I just figured, hey, I've been drawing for 3 years, and I just finished a drawing that I like in particular, and I'm like, I apparently kind of inspire people to make things sometimes. So I'm like, let's actually cover a thing that I've been doing for years now that hasn't really been compatible with being a YouTuber, and like it's not really like visible unless you're following very specific websites and so on. But yeah, this is my little setup here. I got an iPad on a little goofy stand here with little notches and a pen, and I just draw. And I've just been doing that for a while and figured we'd go back to the beginning of that process. Don't break. So I curated a little slideshow here to look at this. The thing I'm using to highlight my mouse for the presentation is doing the classic 2001 app thing of being like, oh, this was a trial. I'm going to start pestering you now for money in real time. And I'm like, dude, I just started recording. All right, if this just got to ignore this window, I'll tuck it over here. I'll deal with that later. No, stop. Go away. It's fine. We're fine. Anyway, my drawing journey I've always been interested in drawing, and I've done it a little bit on and off since I was a little kid, but really, really did not do it as an adult, in particular because I was being a YouTuber and I was busy with this, and I started doing YouTube since when I was 21, when I was in college. So I went from being busy in college to being busy with college and YouTube, to being busy with YouTube, to being busy with YouTube at my job, to being busy with being a full-time YouTuber. So I wasn't really getting much drawing done, but I was like generally interested in it as a kid. I remember I would take the manual that came with Diablo 2 and try to redraw like the paladin and stuff like that and things like that. But then really had a big drought for a very long time. But then COVID happened, and a lot of people had journeys with COVID of self-discovery or bread baking or coming out as whatever, as their sexuality or their gender and so on. A few years into COVID, 2022 was the year where I came out as gay, and then I also came out to my audience, and I also was being more open to my audience about being furry. And in that in-between phase, when I was kind of out but wasn't fully rebranded in places and so on, I was having like a really bad day where I was kind of having like an anxiety attack or something, and just couldn't function as far as like doing anything professionally. And I was just like, well, how do I reroute this energy? What do I do with this day? How do I make myself feel better? And so on. And I somehow landed on driving to a craft store and buying like a big binder of like sketch paper, like textured paper, and a set of colored pencils. And I drew this based on a friend's fursona and the location Shofro River from Bloodborne. And just this is just kind of what came out of that process. It's just the color, like I was taken by the color gradient of Shofro River in Bloodborne and how beautiful that area was, and was kind of thinking about that at the time, and just kind of wanted to do a little doodle, and just drew a little like stuffed animal version of a fursona with just colored pencils, and just kind of like did it from scratch. Working with traditional is interesting because you can't fix your mistakes that much. You can't really zoom in. You can't control Z, but you get this really satisfying texture from pencil on paper that I've never really gotten since from when I'm doing digital. And I kind of miss it sometimes. I do like just kind of shading stuff with colored pencils and overlapping different colored pencils. But like didn't really know what I was doing. Kind of was winging it the whole time. And it was kind of a callback to this thing I did when I was in class, where I was just like sitting through a lecture and I had colored pencils on hand, and I drew this in like 2012 or something. So this was me returning to drawing like a full decade since the last time I drew anything, because this was like a full decade ago when I just sat there and like shaded away at something during a very long lecture in class. I just kind of like drew this like, I basically just drew I try to remember if I drew the gradient first or the tree. I probably drew the tree I might have drawn the gradient first and the tree over it, but I'm not sure. I probably had to draw the tree first, and then the gradient around it, just try to make it look natural as I went. But just kind of like enjoyed drawing the splitting sort of fractal tree, landed on this kind of heart shape in the middle, drew this like sunset thing, which looks like a technique, like I know what I'm doing or something, but it's honestly like I just did a sequence of pencil colors and overlapped them. Just picked out I just picked out some colored pencils, held them up to each other, ended up like on a nice like gradient visual of just like what the pencils looked like in my hands, and was like, I'll just color this in with these pencils in this order, overlapping them somewhat. And it's just like a dark blue, this like pinkish reddish orange, pinkish reddish like purplish color, then like some regular red, orange, yellow, and just worked my way down. And that's just like a fun little color experiment I did because I was really bored in college. And this is like me kind of revisiting some of that idea a decade later. And at that point I was like, you know what, that was a good day just doing this for a while. Like, it's not just about the product. This is the thing that AI can't replace, because like blah 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 AI, but it's AI is scary on some levels if you, for example, make a living as a concept artist for movies and games and stuff, because those are the types of weird tech companies that will replace artists because they're stupid. But as far as like human art and so on, people do value human art, but also the act of creating human art serves a purpose in your life. You're working on a craft, but you're also just like kind of putting yourself in a different creative space that has its own value for your own like emotional well-being in a given day, and like there's its own value there. But after doing this drawing, I was like, you know what, I'm 32 years old at the time. I've been engaging with, or at least watching, this art community, the furry fandom, for my entire adult life now. I like art, I like drawing. It's like, why don't I just like make this stuff? Why don't I just like give it a go? This little pop-up's gonna be so annoying. It just keeps moving around. I just thought it would be helpful to have a circle around my mouse, and I wanted to download a thing for that, and I've made a mistake. It's fine. But I was like, why don't I draw? Like, I've always wanted to draw. I've always been interested in this stuff. Why don't I just commit? Just put that, like, if you live once, if you value things, then you need to just actually put them in your life. So it's like, it's up there with like getting on track with cooking and exercising and going for walks and like meeting people you're interested in and dating and so on. It's like, if you want to play an instrument, if you want to draw, if you want to make a certain type of YouTube video, it's like just like how I was in the middle of like kind of having my first success as a video essayist because the Beastars video came out, and it's like that's one of the things where it's like it didn't fit in my life, but then I just like kind of started doing it and made it happen, and then now I'm a video essayist, and and then in a similar 3-year arc, just became an artist by just drawing, because you just do it to do it, and so I just realized like I need to start drawing if I want to be someone who draws. That's just how that works. So I just started. I just grabbed some shitty colored pencils, and I gave myself a challenge, because I was like, okay, there are immediately limitations to drawing physically. There are upsides. You could really focus on this. You could make this your skill. You could really, really go in on doing it all traditional with like paints or charcoals or crayons or colored pencils or any combination thereof, Sharpies and stuff. There's a number of ways to do that, and that's rewarding in its own way, but it was immediately frustrating. So I gave myself a thing where I'm like, okay, obviously I would like to have a drawing tablet of some sort, either like a screen that attaches to your computer, like a Cintiq or whatever, that I can then use for computer drawing apps, or I need to get like an iPad or something like that. And there's different pros and cons between those things. But above all, before I choose any of those things, I just need to prove to myself that I'm going to keep drawing. And this is a good thing that you could potentially do to yourself too. It's a good entry point thing. Like, create a goal. Is that I gave myself a 30-day drawing challenge. I was like, I need to draw for 30 days, not necessarily consecutive days. It doesn't have to be all in a row like a streak necessarily. I think I took like 2 months to do this goal basically, but it's like I need to spend 30 days drawing where I really like commit to something and try to draw something decent every day for 30 days or something. And if I can stick to it for that long, then I can think about impulse buys. Not really an impulse buy at that point, but of like giving myself tools and investing in this, because I don't want to just be like, yeah, I wish I drew, and then buying that stuff. Like, unlike guitar and so on, you don't have to buy the whole, like, you don't have to buy the guitar before you start the way that you have to do with guitar. Like, you can do very cheap shit with random pencils and things just to make yourself practice and commit to it before you do any level of investment with art. And then you can buy the expensive thing. And expensive varies. There's like drawing tablets that are pretty cheap that just don't have screens on them, that are like a mouse essentially. You're doing this with your hands, but looking up at the screen, and like there's a little bit of a learning curve to those two things correlating, but you can do that. You don't have to draw directly onto a screen. And you could just never get a digital version. But this is from the 30-day drawing challenge I gave myself. I drew one of my Discord moderators as a bear. This is when things were kind of just starting off with people kind of like being more open about furry and stuff in the Discord. It's uncolored except the eye, which is a little thing that I enjoyed doing it for a bit there, where it's like it's a lot to fully color something in with colored pencil, but just getting that little eye colored in, it is a nice little like flair to add in. And I had this like little difference where it was like the top and bottom of the eye are different colors, which leads to a little gradient that's like neat to look at. It's kind of intriguing. You can see I'm immediately like, must draw a large man was the immediate obvious motivation here. And there are things about this that are okay, and also a lot of it that's really fucked up. The perspective of the shoulders is really weird. That's not how muscles work. Honestly, better hand than some of the shit that I've drawn in the meantime. Hands are a pain in the ass. But just a particular, like, I don't know, it's like, this is like something vaguely anime. I just kind of went for strong, simple shapes. I'm always going all over the place in what motivates me and what kind of art style I'm even going for. But here I wanted to go like kind of cartoony and straightforward. And so I wasn't like agonizing over the individual and pieces of the skull and so on. But it's just some fun. You just go, you just commit. I drew harder outlines for the body shape, but then I did scribbles on the outlines to try to simulate fur, which is an approach, not one I would necessarily stick to. This was the next one bit. Immediately we have something that has been an interesting trend, which is that I do not want to draw a simple pose. I almost never draw a guy just standing. I almost always draw some kind of weird camera angle or some kind of like semi-convoluted pose or something, which is upsides and downsides. Upside, I get to constantly change these and challenge myself and try to figure out how to interpret these weird perspectives and bits of like these body shapes and everything. But downside is I am kind of still bad at drawing a guy just standing in full frame. If you want me to draw a full body head to toe of a person and make it all proportional and everything and make the anatomy work, I definitely get stuck for a bit there because I'm so used to kind of like doing these, because like these kind of poses they're expressive and they're fun, and honestly it's like a good goal to have. It's fun to challenge yourself and always draw something different. It's not necessarily great practice to constantly go different directions and not like hit one note over and over again to try to like actually get good at that specific thing. And yeah, like these kind of things hide anatomy in many cases by having it be behind things, which does mean you don't necessarily have to draw it. So it's both a shortcut and a challenge in different ways. There was a bit here where I thought part of my style was going to be this like cross-hatched fur around the head and the colored eyes and so on. There's like something vaguely Lego-shy about the head here, even though nothing else about the body really looks like that. It's almost like gorilla anatomy otherwise. But I remember being really proud of this at the time that I made it. And it's like, it is nice to look at in some ways. There are some strange details here and there. But for a pencil drawing, I was pretty happy with it at the time. You can see the little funny details here, like how this ear is clearly shorter than the other one because I ran out of space on the paper, and instead of like planning for it to go off, I like clearly didn't register that I made them different lengths and so on. This is the the Sonic Adventure meme pose. This one's funny. I like Where Garurumon a lot. The Digimon. I don't really like Digimon that much or Pokemon that much, but there's specific furry characters from throughout them that are fun. Where Garurumon is fun because he is so over-designed and try-hard at being cool that it wraps back around past being kind of cringe to kind of being awesome again. Like the belts, the one arm that's kind of like has like a rubber gimp looking thing going on to it, but then that's covered in zippers for some reason. He has feather hair or something. Multiple scars, piercings, spiked knee pads, but different numbers of spikes on each knee, a bunch of weird wraps and bangles and gauntlets and mixed weird combinations of like battle armor and then like just streetwear that's all torn up, and then bandaged foot and stuff like that. Just he's a wild character. I gotta draw him again as I progress and see if I've gotten any better at this stuff. But here, the struggle here is that I tried to draw a very anatomical character. First of all, with how over-designed Digimon are, how the fuck why would they design characters that look like this for an animated show? Like, horrific character designs for anyone to ever have to draw moving. What is up with that? You specifically simplify characters for the purposes of animation. That's why Pokemon look the way they do by comparison. But wild character. But the Sonic Adventure pose, Sonic is a real simple, cartoony, like rubber hose sort of character. And him doing that pose, like, whoa, he's all loose and stuff. And I did not. I needed to come up with a goal of like how loose and how exaggerated and am I going to be versus how like accurate to being on model am I going to be, and I didn't really land on a good answer. And to an extent, this is like too rigid. It looks too much like the original character and isn't like stylized to do the pose, so it kind of fails there. But I also weirdly made the feet really big, like Sonic's shoes, to try to recapture the premise of that, but that doesn't work either. There's just a lot going on here that is wild. I also definitely accidentally made both feet right feet. Yeah, this is the inner toe is the big one, but this one the outer toe looks like it's the big one, which is so this whole foot's backwards. But like you can tell I'd already worked so hard on this that I'm like, it has to just count. We can't let this be. I cannot start over. And then here's some fun stuff you can do when you're trying to learn is you can do studies. You can try to draw other people's drawings. I forgot to credit this one. Whoops. But this is 6 different people's avatars on Twitter that I was following at the time. Obviously, this up here and this down here are all Lego Shi from Beastars. This is from Nomi Fuki, the artist, and this up here is a drawing by Terran Fiddler. I was just trying to recreate things I saw with pencil just by eye and just seeing like kind of what you can learn as you go there. I kind of need to do more of these because like I'm particularly obsessed with Nomi Fuki for the incredible expressions that are and her ability to do these crazy expressions on these like wolf characters and like figuring out how to draw that, like translating certain insane anime-ish character expressions to a character with a muzzle and ears and all that. I struggle to this day at creating expressions. And this might seem like I'm just doing okay, but it's just because I'm just looking at somebody else's drawing and redrawing that. But like doing it myself, it is so hard to solve the 3D shape of a head with that has a muzzle sticking out of it at an angle, and then getting that all to look right, and then after all that work trying to figure out how to make that face expressive in some way is like a wild project. But I was pretty surprised by what I was able to accomplish here with just a pencil and paying attention. This was not one day. This was several days compiled into a thing afterwards. But it's a fun little experiment to do. This is just me drawing people from the Discord. This arm looks a little short here, but it's like it's coming out all right. You can see I'm doing the rigidity of the body. There's that eerie way that the knee can bend backwards slightly in this kind of pose, but then like having the clothes drape off and so on. And then this was just me teasing somebody about supposedly liking Leo. I didn't know who Leo was yet because I had not actually played Echo, so I just looked up a picture and drew my first Leo fan art technically before I even knew who that was. But just kind of just doing different random things. There's inside jokes here. If you try to start drawing, I recommend just go. If you come up with anything that motivates you to draw any drawing, just grab onto it and keep going. If it doesn't matter if it's full of inside references or if it's a joke at a specific person or if it's a meme, you're redrawing a meme pose, anything that just gets you to actually start going instead of sitting around and thinking about stuff or worrying about if ideas are good enough. All that stuff is just stuff that makes you not draw. Just draw. You just gotta start drawing. That's all you do. You start drawing right now. You should be drawing by the time this video is over, really. You should just start drawing right now. Like anything that comes to mind. Redraw anything that comes to mind and you just do it. So I draw a dumb thing. I drew a dumb thing that featured inside references to somebody in the Discord and a character from a visual novel I hadn't played yet and didn't know anything about, just to torment them about it. I remember this Bork Thunder tweeted that it's National Hug-a-Zolo Day, so I just actually drew Marrow hugging their character from the time, and that was the entire motivation. I just went, like see something on social media, start drawing immediately, and then you just go and you have a drawing. Some of this kind of comes out all right. There's obviously a lot of anatomical things. Trying to figure out the height differences of the characters. The bottom of this arm is weirdly flat, but I'm just kind of improvising the kind of rubbery hands here. But a lot of the gesture comes out nice. It's actually like, it's kind of sweet. Like the body language and the actual emotion is like kind of decent for how like janky a lot of the stuff is. Like I'm kind of happy with this. This was around the time where I was coming up with like getting more and more used to how to sketch with pencils, which is that you want to sketch very lightly with you want to sketch very, very lightly, get the very basic shape and gesture of the thing down. The first thing you want to do when you're sketching is try to figure out the emotion, the energy of the piece, what the shape of it is. Then you come back and draw over that and you refine it into actually having like bodies that make sense and you do that on like the next layer essentially. Then you come back and actually try to like nail down like the lines that you're actually going to use, and you like actually start making the real drawing at that point, which you do in iPad and so on by physically making different layers. You can draw a layer, then reduce its opacity to make it less apparent, then make a new layer and draw over it and so on. But you can actually do this really easily with pencils. If you get a black like colored pencil, not black colored pencil, just a drawing pencil set of black pencils that have different hardnesses and like darknesses and so on. If I remember correctly, you draw with like a harder pencil that's like kind of like more resistant to coming off, and that kind of pencil will be easier to draw lightly with. And then you come back with the softer pencils which come off darker. Just spend 2 seconds with the pencils, you'll get a vibe for which ones come out at which darknesses and so on. You can genuinely do certain sketches with pencils that are almost invisible, especially when you scan them like this. These pictures are all put through a scanner. That's why they look kind of a little blown out. You can become more intense over time with your darknesses as you draw, and that allows you to sketch and do the finished thing all on the same piece of paper as you're learning and so on. And here I was doing particular things with the hair. I was really happy with the hair here specifically because I just went, I just engaged the muscle in your wrist that kind of, if you do this, if you make your hand like tremble, like there's just like a, in your anatomy, there's just like, I assume this is a thing that other people have, and I'm just not making up. But like, you can like, this is like a thing your hand can do. So I just like tried to figure out, just like drag it across while trembling, like just kind of scribble, just kind of like get it to go, because I struggle with overthinking every individual little hair spike, weird little anime hair spike that goes in the hair. But when I drew the Zolo's hair, when I drew Bork's hair, I just went, yeah, just like, and it just came out good on the first try with this like kind of like style to it. That was me not thinking and just kind of going and then being like, yeah, and just being happy with the shape that came out of that. So this is me finishing the challenge. This is a curated collection of drawings, so I'm not showing you literally every single one. But my last drawing was of Amicus for the month, and then I celebrated getting the art tablet by then redrawing the same piece in digital arts and trying to give that a go. So you can see the kind of comparison here. I think I did just photograph it and draw over it. It wasn't me redrawing it from eye. I just wanted to like kind of get used to trying to draw digitally. And you kind of see the strengths and weaknesses of both. The shapes are kind of fucky. Like, they're kind of noticeably weirder in the digital one because I'm trying to get used to it. It is weird to draw on a screen, but like this eye is rounder and then weirder here, and I'm not used to it, but just figuring it out, trying it out. Weird wavy lines. It's a bit of a battle when you're used to drawing on paper because the texture is so nice, but then you do this and it's like, ugh. You notice that your pen is sliding around. You get a screen protector that recreates a paper texture, which I did do. It's not the same thing. It's not actually the same thing as drawing pencil and paper, but it is kind of nice. And it's a screen protector, which has its own value. But it's definitely a learning curve. There's a bunch of settings you can get into to stabilize your pens, to get them to work better. But immediately you can see I get to play with color more because I get to experiment without damaging the art. Because I would try to play with color here, you are committing for that piece. Like, if you have a particular idea and you're drawing physically, it's both freeing and upsetting that like you have the one go and that's it. And so there's a disposability to it that's kind of satisfying that lets you keep going, but at the same time, you get worried about experimenting because you'll destroy the piece. If I try to color over this thing with like, I don't know, watercolors or something, and it doesn't work out right, that piece is just like that now forever. I can't undo. Here I can make individual layers behind and in front of Amicus and like try to do like lighting and so on. And like spend time with that and have a good time with that. And immediately I am enjoying that change. And so I started doing this. I discovered the symmetry tool in Procreate, which you can create a vertical seam down the middle of the art, or you can move it around. And if you draw on one side, it'll draw on the other side equally. And I started using this and abusing this to draw heads in a way that was I found satisfying at the time. In this one, I particularly went on a goal where I basically finished the drawing, but then I was like, how do you create a lineless drawing? And you can alpha lock the line art layer where you drew the lines, and then you can just paint over the lines without it painting over other things or having to actually worry about painting. You just get to change the color of the lines via alpha lock. So there's a few spaces here and there where you can barely make out the lines or where the lines are separate, like at the edge of the hair here, where some of it's colored gray. Right here, you can see the gray outline of the hair, and then the actual painting I did separately. Because I was coloring over the lines that were originally all black. The edges of these ears have like a single flesh-colored rim to them. There's still some evidence that I colored over the lines afterwards. But yeah, this was a normal line art-based drawing that I then colored in, but then colored over. But I was starting to experiment with doing digital painting a little bit here, like doing these like textures, doing something other than just like coloring in shapes flat as just one solid color. I was starting to do experimentation here, and in some cases, in some ways I kind of spent the next 2 years still chasing this piece because it accidentally came out better than I knew it even could. And there's stuff about it that aren't entirely intentional, and I'm still trying to figure out on some level, because it is actually so hard to paint physically or digitally. And like, And there's goofiness here. Like this mouth is weird, this beard is kind of weird, but like a lot of the stuff going on with the eyes and the hair and some of the shading is like very nice. I was happy with how this turned out, and then the struggle then became how to do stuff like this on purpose in the future, which didn't necessarily always happen. This is kind of examples of how progress is non-linear, but like me just kind of experimenting and having fun with this digital tool and what you can do with it. This is me playing with brushes and just kind of enjoying the fact that like you can draw this character and then I can do a little different brushes to change the gradient of the outline, because this is like very flat coloring. But then I'd be like, how do we simulate hair? What if the edges of the pattern were this texture here? And then when it came time to do shading and add the black for the shadows and then highlights and so on, I was like, what if I kind of fucked around with this, like, you could smudge, but you could smudge with a weird fixed texture. So I did this, I found this line-based texture and then smudged with it, which was just a very strange little thing, but this is just total fucking around. But there's parts of this that are kind of evocative, and it was kind of fun. And you kind of just find this stuff out by just fucking around. This is an example of kind of doing like meme drawings and stuff. There was a what's the anime called? Don't Mess with Isoken, I think. There's an anime about creating anime. It's a bunch of like high school kids, I think, that were in an anime club making anime, and they did a short animation together, and that was the whole season is about that. It has a very good animated intro that's a lot of fun with the three characters striking poses and things. And so I drew Marrow, Odessa, and Odessa as Stephanie. Drew the three of our characters doing some of the poses from the sequence, and kind of evoking elements of those characters a bit, and like doing versions of the background and so on, and just like kind of riffing on that. And there's a goofiness here. There's like some parts that come out well and some parts that do not. And also like always trying to find like how much do I stay true to characters being on model versus how much do I recreate the stylization of the thing that I'm evoking here and so on. And this is some fun. This is me trying to do insane little expressions. It was part of a 30-day art challenge called November. Knoll, Gnoll, like the hyena guys and fantasy stuff. These are fun challenges to take part in if you see them. There's probably an art challenge happening every month at all times. They kind of never stop happening. But and they're low stakes, much like the game jams and stuff like that, like I've talked about before. They're just excuses to draw. I said before that like you just need like a thing to make you draw, and you should just follow that impulse whenever it happens. So it's always good to start an art jam, for example, just for the sake of trying to draw, and just commit to that. You don't have to do the entire 30-day challenge. You can just draw however many you want. You could do the entire 30-day challenge over the course of 90 days. You could just do a few of them, whatever current day it is, and just leave huge gaps in between. You don't have to commit the whole way through. Personally, this is the one that I did the most, and I probably did like a week or something. But in this one in particular, I was looking up hyena teeth online and trying to get into the weirdness of the anatomy there, and then I was also kind of evoking the weird gross out art that you might remember from like Neversoft's Tony Hawk games. Like the first 3 games had a bunch of like skater art that was like, oh, like kind of gross out, like stabbed eyeballs, guy with face getting blown away and eyes sticking out of their sockets and all this weird stuff. And so I was kind of trying to figure out how to do some of that while also trying to figure out just like how to draw weird teeth, and how do you kind of create any kind of expressions, and how do I loosen up and try to solve the fact that I just am always struggling to draw heads. So I just kind of drew a striped hyena with a hair dryer blowing in his face, and just it all being exaggerated for that purpose. I also like to just draw people's personas. So like I'll just have mutuals on Twitter and Blue Sky, and just like seeing them around, I'll periodically want to draw their stuff. And sometimes I'll be talking to them and learning about parts of their style and how they do things. In particular, here I was talking to Weirids, and I love their Brad badger, and I was particularly getting into how they they will loosen up their lines by, instead of just drawing a line, they'll draw a bunch of hashed lines that don't line up with the axis of the line, but evoke the shape of the line. So my goal here was just to draw these lines and try to evoke that. You can also see here I cheated a bit and had this like hard line, but then I erased pieces of it to create a similar effect. I was just trying to figure out, like, how do you create tapered lines? How do you experiment with different levels of thickness on the lines to try to like evoke things differently? Because if all of your lines are the same thickness, they're all equally important. But if you use thicker lines for the overall shape or gesture or the important part of the character, and then thinner lines for accents and like furrowed face and muscle things, you can really do a lot more there. There's still stuff here that I did well. There's stuff that I did well here that I haven't done like that since, and I need to revisit some of this here in general. You can also see I'm still using this. I'm using the symmetry tool again. So this, like, I would draw one side and the other side would match, but then I would try to break the symmetry by then drawing on another layer asymmetrical elements. So I drew the hair separately. So this hair is not symmetrical. This part here in particular is obviously not symmetrical. This tongue is added separately. And so you can do this to break up the symmetry and make it less obvious that the whole thing is drawn that way. Because if the whole thing is symmetrical, it's kind of uncanny. But if you have elements that break it, then that kind of cleans things up. I'm also just never deciding. I'm never landing on a consistent way of drawing eyes, or really any part of the body. I'm all over the place. I don't have a specific style, and I'm still trying to improvise a lot of the stuff. Just still trying to find what I even like about my own drawing and what I want to change about that. This was a return to trying to experiment with painting, because painting's a lot of fun. So I put a lot of work into this. Frankly, too much work into this. I like really committed to really detailing and figuring out a style and a way of trying to paint the overall body. I really like Asavir's character design here. It's a goat that's like a broken horn that's pierced, a very muted color palette, eyes that are not monochrome despite the rest of the body being pretty monochrome. So like the accent of the scar and the flesh color of the ears and the eyes all like pop slightly with color compared to the grayscale overall body here. The horn was very fun to draw, doing this like geometric shape that's kind of turning away from the perspective. There's the jewelry and the hair and so on. I kind of like this drawing more than the finished one because it's really what I cared about was getting all of these paintings details right and figuring out how to accent everything and how do I express this. Like I kept trying to really smooth the gray. You can see some of it here on the left chest here where it's really smooth and undetailed, and I was never happy with it. And I was like, I gotta get chunky. And so I after being mad at this drawing for so long, I then went back and just drew with harsher contrasting colors in more visible strokes. And so you can see all the individual strokes I was drawing here, and I just drew those over each other instead of smoothing it into a gradient. And I was way happier with that. So I just left this, like, these individual strokes here really standing out. And that was like a lot more fun than sitting here and trying to smooth it and make it look like it was like realistic and so on. Like that stylization was more fun for me than doing the other was. This drawing on the right is his boyfriend, drew very simply, but the purpose was just to be able to put this effect here, because of the original idea for the drawing was to have him mostly submerged underwater, figure out how to render different levels of blurriness and opacity so it looks like it's deeper underwater. Having the face reflecting in the water was just kind of some fun there, and that's where the hair is floating like this, is because it's like supposed to be on the water. So like I'm interacting with that bit of the environment. That's why both the ears are sticking up, because they're supposed to be like floating a bit, but both submerged at that point. But I did not have a great idea on how to actually draw the water. So I have like a kind of nice color going on here with the green to blues and so on, but I didn't really know how to like make it look like rippling water. So bit of a failed experiment, but really challenged myself, and really I spent like a week on this, and it just like it's one of the highlights of me drawing, was just kind of going through all this and like really caring a lot about this stuff.
Whew.
This video has turned out to be much more long and rambly than I originally anticipated, even though that's literally how every video always goes, so what else should I expect at this point? I just like talking about art, apparently. This is Rose Fix, their clown character Foley. They just said that, I don't even remember, there was like some kind of comment about like Foley's piano teeth, so then I was like, oh, remember that trope from like Looney Tunes and so on, where a character would like, they get like, I think a piano would land on them when they'd come out of like the lid of the piano and they'd have a bunch of piano teeth like sticking out of their mouth. So I just drew that. That's the bit. Just big old cartoony character, and that's just committing to that. Y2K. Well, yick. I drew Mero yicking out. Here, this was fun as I started getting really into trying to figure out how to draw clothing and fabric. I like how the belly and underarm and like the pulling of the fabric looks here, where I did the physical like line art, the hard lines here, but then I also did shading on multiple layers of opacity. In a fair number of my drawings, I started doing a thing where I have 2 layers of shading, just like one layer called shading and one layer called darker shading. And it's me drawing these darker bits to try to like create the shadows. And so I did a bunch of these like spiky, tapered clothing patterns here to make it look like the cloth is bunching and stretching and so on in a way that you might expect from that, and offloading some of that expression to the lighting that I do at the end of the process instead of it all being done via the line art at the beginning of the process. So it's a bit of like planning ahead and doing different things there. Then I also have a highlight layer where I'm drawing the lighter bit just by drawing like white in a lower opacity over the stuff too. Decent amount of things worked out okay here. Hands did not come out for shit, but I was really focusing on the clothing here the most. Also, there's a weird line here, but that's true to the art style of Yick and what it was known for. That's why there's a weird diagonal line across the face that's like a strange cheekbone. This was a trade. I did my first art trade, and these are very fun. As you and somebody else just both draw for each other. We just both drew icons for each other. Intimidating because Charlie is a much better artist than I am, so it's like it was being accepted as doing a trade with somebody that was much more experienced was intimidating. But I tried really hard. I spent so long on this drawing. Pretty happy with how the muzzle comes out. You can see here I'm really focusing on different line thicknesses. Right here, like this fur has outlines, but it's very thin. And then this right here, the edge of the muzzle and the lips and the edge of the face has much thicker lines, and that difference really creates a cool effect where there's a different line. It's called line weight, sorry, W-E-I-G-H-T, and that creates the overall like expression here where you have different emphasis on different elements, and that kind of like really helps, and it's a thing that's always worth keeping in mind. In this particular case, I'm definitely trying to do Beastars, like the Beastars manga style fur, where I'm trying to come up with a particular way of like really having bunches sticking out everywhere. Still never really fully landed on how I want to draw hair and fur. I'm always unsure of how to handle, like, because like shoulders are optional. People often just draw furries with just like skin looking bodies basically, but part of the furry aesthetic is always to have some kind of tufts of hair on like the edge of the face, and that I overthink the hell out of and never really quite land on how I want to draw it. This one worked out for me because I was really committing to the whole thing having that particular look, but I'm never fully sure how I want to handle the edge of the face overall. Lots of layers of shading here. I kind of did a 3D glasses effect with the eyes, but in particular just kind of split down the middle and had the eyes and the background doing that. Just kind of came up with that on the fly and just like liked the vibe of that. It wasn't really like that motivated or based on anything specifically, but I like the idea of having the eye color come through the glasses and ignore the lens because I felt like it, basically. And you can just do that. It's always a good detail to just like 3Dify your teeth and jewelry by having shading on both sides, and like just really making them look like they kind of stand out. But yeah, you can see like there's elements of this that came out pretty well. One of the best muzzles I've ever drawn, where it really like kind of bulges out at us, like it really does look kind of 3D. But then like this mouth, this tongue and stuff looks 2D. Like it's like this looks flat, even though this looks pretty not flat. And that's, even though they're so close to each other, it's like, it's fascinating trying to figure out how to sell those things, by which I mean like how to like make it seem right, like look correct and so on. I use the word sell a lot. This was a birthday present for Toaster. We had both been nerding out over the game Signalis, and I decided to draw him in the style of various both aesthetic references and spoilers and other things throughout Signalis. So the red hands, the cybernetic face, having his piercing and eye color shine through the cybernetic part of the body. A lot of stuff going on here that was based on elements of Signalis. I did not do it as pixel art. I was into the idea of drawing it as pixel art, but then I tried looking into pixel art programs, and I'm like, this seems way too complicated and too different from drawing the way I'm used to. So I did cheat and just do a pixelation filter over the drawing when I was done with it. And it's still a creative choice. You're choosing to pixelate it in this specific resolution and so on, and presenting it that particular way. But no, it's not genuine pixel art, and it's just a filter for the sake of like evoking the aesthetic of what I was going for. But fun to work on. I enjoyed that whole vibe. I actually have a lot of the drawings I've done and will be showing here are birthday gifts. Just, it's a furry's birthday, draw them. That's an easy thing to just do for somebody. You find out when people's birthdays are in advance, and then realize like, okay, it's coming up. I can put that on my calendar, and then I can just draw this person in the lead up to that happening. This is a different excuse, which is that we were hosting fighting game tournaments for a little bit there, and so I would just draw the winner as like a fun little prize. In this case, the winner was Horror Buns. Destroyed me in the first round. I was like, Blanca's fun. Blanca has giant shoulders, just big, strong, Bara-looking character that appeals to me visually for obvious reasons. And I just wanted to figure out Blanca. Super weird play style. But then Horror Buns showed up to the tournament, and he was really, really good at Blanca, and he was my first opponent, if I remember correctly. Completely obliterated me, which was to be expected because I'm bad at these games. But he was doing shit that I didn't even know the game could do, or that Blanca could do. So I drew, since he won, I drew his hyena persona as Blanca, evoking the general like pose and so on. So I just looked up a Blanca reference and sort of like recreated the pose, but with this character's design. I'm happy with a lot of how it came out. It's a lot of fun. It's very indulgent to add a bulge, obviously, in the shading. But this was a lot of fun. Figuring out how to draw teeth and have that work out. He looks like this angry homeless yin, like there's this scruffy vibe and everything. But it came out pretty good shape wise. It comes out at us. I have this lighting of warm lighting on top, which is kind of vague and not that interesting on the back of the character, but here on the top of the muzzle really does sell the 3D shape in a cool way. It was inspired by watching Horror Buns draw his art. He was doing a commission for me at the time, and I noticed that he, when it's time to do rendering, to do the lighting and so on, he would just whip out the the airbrush tool, and just like do really quick lighting, right up front, and then maybe detail and render from there and make it more specific. But he immediately would just like do the paintbrush style, airbrush style, soft and loose and big. And so I tried to recreate that, and I tried to do tried to open it up with this like blurry airbrush shading for the dark and the light here, and did a warm color for that, but then also did the harsher shadows inside of that. So you have the darkest shadows here, but then you do have like a brighter and a darker element to it on top of that. Don't have a completely finished idea of how to do it necessarily, but like it is like, it's like trying to figure out how to like render and do lighting, and I do have a lot of fun with shading. It's one of my favorite parts where it's kind of relaxing. Like anatomy is so hard, facial expressions are so hard, other parts of the body and other parts of the process are so hard that by the time it's colored in and I'm just doing shading, it's like, it's kind of like a little victory lap where I get to just like experiment with how to make it look at that stage of the process, but all the hard stuff's kind of gone. But then I'm kind of, it becomes a thing about like how much knowledge do I have, how many more tricks or things do I want to apply here. But because the hard stuff's over, it kind of just feels like you're just like putting the finishing touches on it, and that can be a fun thing to spend time on. I do feel like it feels weird to do soft shading and hard shading together, but I do see people do it, so it's applicable on some level. But here it's both. It's like at the time this was my favorite drawing so far, but there are parts of it that are a little weird and goofy. He has a hat, so I drew it like blasting off behind him, like it just flew off, so I didn't have to draw it on him directly. And the background is just evoking Blanca lightning, but I didn't want to actually figure out how to draw it specifically. So the background's very, it's like a chalk drawing of a background to evoke the rest of the idea. This is the next one was Yug won the next one. He won as Cammy. So I drew his persona doing the spiral arrow attack that Cammy has, where she shoots forward feet first and spins. And I tried selling. I didn't really so much have the twisting body, although I don't think that Cammy's body necessarily twists during the animation either. It kind of looks like it's spinning while rigid, maybe. If I revisit this, I definitely would love to have the torso twisting and the arms, like have the whole body look like it's physically twisting instead of just trying to add a spiral afterwards. But here you can see him figuring out a really particular perspective, like how do I sell that the feet are closer and the body's further away? Like the whole bottom half of the body is going to look way bigger, and parts of it work, parts of it don't. A lot of detail, lighting, and so on. But then it came time to actually draw how Spiral Arrow works, which is, it has this big flamey effect, and this covered a lot of it, so I have two versions of the drawing, because this one just has like an anime eye streak and just kind of like a thing to gesture at motion, whereas this has the actual fire effect, which actually came out kind of decent, but it covers up so much of what I was working on. I don't hate it covering the feet, because the feet weren't amazing looking to me, but like I put a lot of work into other elements of this that are just way less apparent in that version. But you can see I'm progressing here, a bunch of different layers to the shading, which I like to focus on, and I'm like using shading to add things. Like one of the mistakes you can run into, I think, when you're drawing is you try to outline everything. You try to draw everything. So it's like, oh, kneecaps and leg muscles and so on. And you start off just sketching and doing line art. So you sit there and try to draw every one of those elements with the lines, but it'll be there'll be so many details on the screen that it's like you can't follow any of it anymore with your eyes. You can draw that stuff in the sketch, but then once it's time to ink your lines and actually commit to that, I think it's worth considering which details are too detailed for the actual lines and maybe are best left as background details for later parts of the process, like the shading, and you can save them for later and have them specifically show up as these different gradients of color that make some of it work. And so I'm kind of like figuring out some of that as I go, and that's all fun. And this was another oh god, what's his name? Sorry, forgetting your name, but this guy won as Zangief, and I just had him crushing someone's head as Zangief, and it's just a big. This is me going back to symmetrical, but I'm also having fun like doing hash marks, and like you see the light. This is the warm shading I did with horror buns here, and the soft gradients here. But then also, instead of doing dark shading via harsher line, instead of doing solid cell shading of darker shaded areas, I instead did it hash marks. So I just drew lines to imply shading and was trying to experiment with some of that here. And that's why the underarm is done via hash marks and so on. And that is fun. This is kind of a middle era. By now, we're probably like a year and a half into my 3-year journey. And so this stuff, I really was starting to feel like, how do I do more with lines, which is kind of paradoxical to here where I said do less lines. But here I was like, what if I drew more lines, but there's lines that serve different purposes? Because I was mostly just using lines as outlines. But what if I do like all these skin wrinkles and clothing wrinkles and these pits for shading? These are lines serving a whole bunch of different purposes in the same thing. And it's kind of working, like trying to figure out how to space them out, which parts to put them in. Like this is a chest, big chest here, giant man titty right here. But how do you draw that? You don't, your first reflex is to draw an outline around the entire chest, right? But that looks janky and weird. And so here it's like, how do I suggest the shape of the chest? Like, okay, here's some warm shading on the top of the pec to give it like a shelf that gives it the 3D effect. And here's some depth around the pits and under the arms, implying that it's kind of coming out. And then there's just like two little lines here kind of suggesting the outline of the shape. And you really do get the sense that here's giant shoulder and neck, and then here's chest, and it's separate because there's darker here and lighter here, and that really comes together. Like this is like, I struggle to do this most of the time. Like I'm happy with this drawing because I'm like, I pulled something off here, and then I spend the next year being like, how do I do that again? Because like that kind of happened on accident. And this goofy little YCH means your character here is a furry thing that happens a lot. And maybe just art stuff in general, but furries do so much commissions in particular that it feels like a furry thing. People sell a your character here drawing all the time, which is like here's a pose, buy this commission and you'll draw, and I'll finish drawing it with your character being there. But sometimes people just leave. We'll draw like a vague blue wolf that says YCH on it, and it'll just be like the implication is that your character is there in the drawing. As like a gesture, like for example, sticker packs on Telegram, which are like emoji type things that people react with, will have your character here there and being like, oh, I'm hugging you, or this or that thing, or not hugging you. But here I'm really going into the line art. Like here we have no shading. I did not do any transparent layers of shading. I'm only doing lines. This is Bork Thunder again, and I'm just trying to be like, okay, how do I shade all the teeth? By just having lines on the backs of them to suggest shadows, and then the back of the ears, and then but also like hashes to like suggest the shapes of the hair and the strands. Like we're expressing this all entirely through lines. Figure out how to do that. Very goofy. It has this vibe to me that reminds me of like Windows 95 clip art, and I kind of dug it. I kind of wanted to figure out how to explore this further. But I then took a big break from art for a few months and forgot how I was doing any of it and kind of lost this. But this is really goofy looking, and I kind of was into the idea of developing it as a style, and it kind of didn't really come through much. Even like this was like one of the next things I drew, and immediately I'm like, I went back into trying to draw somebody goofy, but it didn't necessarily evoke any of like the style there. I just kind of like, it was just kind of a cute goofy drawing, where I did do some line weight to emphasize depth here a bit, but not much else going on here. This was a goofy little icon trade with Jimmy, where he drew the icon of this channel right now, actually. Yeah, I'm using the icon that he traded with me as this channel's icon right now. So little marrow with the muzzle pointed down, eyes up, and all that. He drew that for me, and I drew this for him. And brainstorming ideas, the idea was to draw Jimmy as like try-hard edgy as possible. So I've got like tally marks on his head. You have like face tattoos on the eyes, fake eyes drawn on the eyelids. Someone started vacuuming. I'm sorry if you can hear that. A piercing on the ear that has a gun hanging from it that has the word gun written on it. The pansexual colored tongue, nose piercing, spike collar, and a Dragon Ball Z reference in the case of Bad Man, because Vegeta just walks around with a pink shirt that says Bad Man on it at some point, and it's just like the funniest, most incredible thing I've ever seen. Harsh lines, a full-on like red mohawk, the gradients from red to black, and so on. Just very FU written on the knuckles, pointy talon, nails and teeth and all that. Missing tooth right here. It was just like, how do I keep adding more ideas to keep making it more and more try hard for fun? and I had a lot of fun with this. It was like, sometimes it's just you want to kind of just draw something stupid just to keep going, and so this one has a similar energy to like the hyena with the hair dryer in the face. I'm gonna go ahead and take a break to let this person finish vacuuming. Here's me coming back from a pretty big break. I was struggling here, trying to draw a back, which is like maybe the first and last time I've ever tried to draw the back of a character. It's weird back there. Like, a back is so weirdly flat and undefined, but full of, like, shapes. It's like, something has to go there. Something has to make it make sense. So try to figure out, like, shoulder blade and that weird, like crevice in the back of your back and so on. Zach has a very fun character, Harlow, that just like is extremely, well, just a very fun design, although it's full of like these very complicated designs all over the body, where it's like, how do I draw that? And there's like a back and forth of like, do I try to recreate the marking one-to-one, or do I just evoke the marking? And like, how much do you and do you not try to draw a fur texture? Because like, you can't have a really, really specific outline to that shape the way that furries often do if there's fur there. And there's always the question of like, is there fur? Do furries have fur? Or do they have skin? Is the body covered in like a felt texture, but that's basically skin, and then just the parts that look like they're fur, like they're really hairy, have long fur separately? What is the texture? What are furries like? I always love the fact that like sometimes you'll see a furry with a beard, and then they'll not have a beard, and it's like, it creates the visual of like, what if a furry shaved? And it's like, instead in logically, they'd use a razor, there'd be skin exposed, not fur color, but they're cartoon characters. They're not real. So a furry can in fact shave off a beard without being bald underneath and just have fur underneath instead. That's not how hair works, but they're cartoon characters. That's the dilemma at all times. Anyway, so this character has very specific markings and piercings and all that, and just trying to like go down the checklist of all those things is fun to go through. But this was a struggle. It kind of came out okay, but there's a lot that didn't come amazingly here, and it was me coming back from a big break like before. It's like kind of struggling to get anywhere there. But here's another study, good example of just something you can always do. If you like an artist, like I like Roast Fix a lot, you can just try to draw one of their drawings and try to learn from that process a bit. Definitely evocative one-to-one here. There's definitely some fucked up elements that, like, the perspective is weird. They're pointing the pen and hand towards us here, but in mine it's like perpendicular to the perspective, and there's a giant fucked up thumb shape here. The pan's definitely flat. This is supposed to be a pine marten, and mine definitely came out as just being like a coyote, basically. But like the overall pose is kind of there, but just kind of like trying to get an idea of some of the stuff they draw. Maybe not the most successful experiment ever, but it's an approach you can take, is trying to, like, if you like a particular drawing someone has made, you can try to redraw it. I mean, label it appropriately if you post it anywhere. Be like, yeah, this is a thing, comparing these, blah, I give it a go. Don't, like, claim it's as your own whole idea and so on. But it's not, like, out of line to do that and so on. Still not a ton of progress here, though. But I do love Ro's art style a lot. It's very, like, it has a toony vibe to it, but it also has, like, a painterly texture to it all. And there's the particular way that the hair is rendered. The expressions are very, very strong. Very good expressions. Really, they're really good at creating a lot of, like, slice of life moments and so on that, like, are about extremely specific, nuanced emotions, and then having to draw the faces and things for that. And I'm like, how do you do this? But I do need to, I'm so bad at committing to, like, what kind of style I'm even going for, because drawing anything like how Road does would be cool, but part of me wants to go, like, painterly in the Terran Fiddler territory, and part of me wants to go in other completely different directions, and it's hard to commit. But yeah, coming back from this break, I was like, let's just try to shake off the rust here. I've always liked leads from the comic Barbarous, so I kind of tried to evoke some of that here. Did another one of my symmetry portrait, like head icon drawings, where the asymmetrical element here is some of the magic elements that came up in like volume or like issue like 3 or 4, I think, of the comic. Which is that when they start evoking how much leads is like the Minotaur from the labyrinth of like Greek legend and so on. So here we have him as a familiar. He has these symbols that compel him to try to do things that make people happy. But then here is this like the missing horn and the knives that came up during that element of the comic, where they were really evoking and spelling out that he's the Minotaur from Minos' labyrinth and so on, and not just a random character that came out of nowhere. He's specifically is missing horns. And that's why he looks like that. That's why his overall vibe is like that. Fun character. Didn't quite do him justice, but it was fun to work on that as fan art. Is this really the next thing in my gallery? I skipped. Oh, I remember. So there's a bit of a gap in what I can show you. Maybe even like a solid 8 months where I'm like, I don't really have anything to show you guys for a while. And that's because the drawings got really horny. Which, no shame in that. I'm not hiding it because I don't want people to see it. I'm hiding it because we're on YouTube, and that's just not a thing I can present here. But horny drawing is so good for your art. You should draw really horny things. Just go for it. Have fun. There's nothing more motivating than if you have a really specific kink you're trying to express via art that like no one gets right. Like everyone just doesn't get it the way that you want it to be. Like if you want to do that, you'll get so much practice done so quickly. Just draw whatever, because like I said before, just draw whatever motivates you to draw at a given time. And what motivates you to draw will change month to month, year to year, but just draw it, just go. Because anything that just gets you going and makes you draw instead of staring at a blank canvas or doing nothing that day, that's more practice. That's you getting better at drawing. So if you fixate it on a particular character in Elden Ring or whatever, or you have a particular idea you keep wanting to express, or you just want to get certain scenarios out there without commissioning them and so on, and spending money on it, like you could just commit to that idea and draw over and over again, and that'll be a ton of practice. You just can't put it in a YouTube video afterwards because of the context of what it is. So there's a bit of a gap here where we leap from this to something that in my brain, I'm like, that's way later. But no, it's good practice. It's a lot of fun. Really fucking hard. For a while there, I was like, clothes are hard. Thank God you don't have to draw clothes in these scenarios. But honestly, drawing a character anatomically, doing pretty much anything is hard. Drawing two characters interacting feels impossible. Like that's an incredible task to come up to overcome. And by the time you draw a few pornographic things, you really like the next time you draw a clothed character, you're like, oh, this is cheating. I get to just draw a shirt over them and pants and don't have to figure out the anatomy of this whole chunk because I can just kind of like draw the shape of the clothing loosely around where the leg would be, and then draw some wrinkles in certain spots, and it's like, oh, this is perfect. What a shortcut. Some of those elements are so much easier. But yeah, absolutely. Like this, it's part of the reason why I think I'm sure it doesn't hurt for furry artists practicing and everything, is that they can just draw the horny scenarios that come to mind, and having that guide them just gets so much practice, and it's great. Just do it. Fine. But it does give me a bit of a gap here. But yeah, it was Toaster's birthday this year. I went ahead and drew his persona with 3 of the characters he's had so far on Null Playing Games. That's our tabletop channel where we play tabletop games. So Sandals is his character from Cape Escape. Beck is his character from Dead Laws, and Keaton is his character from Cape Escape 2. And they're noteworthy for being very different heights. All of his characters have been short so far, but his persona is cartoonishly short, like as in like cartoon character short, the way that cartoon characters aren't really applicable to human heights to begin with. And Keaton's the first tall character, so I kind of had fun drawing them all at 4 different heights. And figuring a way to like express them all, cheating a little bit by having Beck be in the back and facing away because he's the most complicated character to draw probably, and just figuring out how to express this as a particular idea, because you get motivated. Like, I have a deadline. I have a birthday date coming up. Let's try to get this done in time. You can tell I tried to do heavy shadows, so anything that's like overhanging something has a pure black shadow. So under the hat, under the hood, the hair, the knees, and the jacket here, just some fun, really dark shadows to like kind of have the characters vanishing into the background a bit of fun. And we're almost caught up here. This was was it Paint Fox posted a fan art somebody made of Cameron from Arches as Kurt Cobain, and I was like, let's take that a little bit further. And so I looked up reference photos of Kurt Cobain from the MTV Unplugged recording, and so like this is heavily referenced from Paint Fox's art of Cameron from the visual novel Arches, and then this photo of Kurt Cobain at the MTV Unplugged performance that he famously did, and just trying to like recreate that character in that context and just go note for note there. Got my squiggly approach to trying to draw the outline of his like fuzzy jacket, which doesn't apply to other parts of the clothes. That creates like a contrast between those bits. Not amazing at reconciling the cartoony egg-shaped eyes and figuring out how to like draw the expression there. There's like ups and downsides here and there. The character has big, chunky, cartoonish hands with 4 fingers, the way that cartoon characters often do. So I then gave his guitar 5 strings to as a joke that he has 1 less finger, so the guitar has 1 less string. Don't know if that actually makes sense for guitar playing necessarily, but that was a fun thing to sneak in there. Mix of styles and things. I was happy with how much I was able to recreate the vibe of this shirt just by like just kind of like drawing things. Like if I remember correctly, I wrote out the word fight, and then I duplicated that layer and colored it black and moved it up and to the right very slightly. Then I duplicated the layer again, another black layer, and moved it down and to the left, but more. And so that created a slight outline above it, but a shadow beneath it. And the actual word fight was written in the same color as the shirt, so it's negative space. And that's how I was able to quickly create this effect, even though I just wrote out the word fight real quick. The way that it looks like it's... Because this looks like it's the word fight with an exclamation point. It could be night, I don't know. But I figured out a version of that. Here I just like drew a bunch of spikes of black and then spikes of white going in and out until it looked kind of like alright. And then I just smudged it back and forth to make it wavy. So that kind of created some of the effect there. You just go. It's chances to... I like drawing this stuff because it's like... Drawing is like a chance to interpret and observe and look at every part of something and really unpack what's going on there. But it's also a lot of problem solving and just like, what can I do with these tools to create a particular effect and trick? And that's like me just like getting to really fix it on a specific element here. But like compared to some of the stuff I had to draw before, we don't need to go all the way back. But this is an example of a character that's so covered in clothes that it was time for me to think a little bit about lighting and how clothes wrinkle, but they obscure so much anatomy that I don't have to draw shit as far as the character goes. Like that's a head and hands, and yeah, the hands aren't that great and the head's not that great, but as far as like the anatomy goes, like he's covered in 3 shirts. Kurt Cobain is wearing a t-shirt, a second t-shirt, a button-up, and then this like wool sweater cardigan thing. I didn't even notice until I started drawing it that he has 2 t-shirts on that are both white, the same color. He's got so many layers on in the studio. It's incredible. So his anatomy could not be more disguised. Like, you do not have to draw a body that well here. You get to just focus on how you're going to make everything else about the other stuff look around the body. And that was some fun. Also, the background is obviously evoking the original background, so I just kind of drew the vague shapes and the vague colors in the same spots. And then just blurred it. And I was like, I genuinely made the entire background in like 3 minutes or something like that. But the moment I added, I'm like, oh, it looks so good though. I love the effect of it being this blurred background behind him that kind of puts him in a space, but we don't see specifically what it is. But like immediately, like I almost always want to have a background of some sort, which you probably already noticed here. It's like they will be done so quickly sometimes. It's just kind of a mess of colors. But like I gotta add something instead of nothing. I want to have a background. You'll notice that I never put out just a sketch or just a line arted thing. I'm not really happy with my drawings until I've done rendering on them and colored them in and like done the shading and stuff. That stuff kind of saves it for me. Like the line art and the sketch part of my drawing is the part I'm least happy with, and so I kind of like need to finish the whole drawing before I'm fully happy with it. By the time I start coloring something in, I'm usually not very happy with that drawing, but I'm just committing to continuing. And mixed results all over the place. Progress is not linear. You take breaks, and also you experiment, and you'll draw stuff that looks worse than stuff you drew months ago or even years ago sometimes. And that happens to every artist, even experienced people that are taking commissions and making a living doing this. They'll look at stuff from 4 years ago and they'll be like, I cooked there. What's up with that? And they'll be confused why some of their old stuff looks so much better than some of their new stuff sometimes. It's not because they got worse. It's just because progress is nonlinear, and every project is its own moving target, and you will just make things that you're less happy with and more happy with in an out of order sense. And that's just part of the normal process. You just do it. You just draw. Start drawing. Just do it. If you want to draw, you can just do it. And that takes us finally to where we actually started this project, and the piece that I wanted to like start this whole thing on, and kind of led to me wanting to like maybe talk about art for a bit. Like, this is how far I've made it. This is neat. Coming here from that original drawing of like the bear or the stuffed animal and so on, like this is a lot of progress. I'm happy with this. I will be proud of myself for a bit and just say that I did good, because I'm happy with how this turned out. This is me 3 years into drawing. It's not amazing. I see incredible stuff every day that blows my stuff out of the water, and that's just the devil of comparison and all that. I look up to a ton of artists, so I'm aware of how this doesn't match up with that stuff, but I'm also like really happy with how elements of this turned out. I enjoyed the perspective of the bat, the overall pose, the dynamism here. That I probably used that word incorrectly. It feels dynamic. I'm once again like I'm drawing a character vertically, just standing for once, which doesn't happen that often. But I'm doing a kind of challenging pose where they're twisting. So their torso is facing almost to us, but their waist is facing almost perfectly away from us to the left. And having that twist and figuring that out was fun. Figuring out what to express via lighting versus lines was fun. And there was a whole process that went into making this that got us here. And it was a journey. And this is also Zach again. This was for his birthday a year after the previous drawing. So when you go between these, you have this was 1 year ago. There's not a lot between. This last year did not have a lot of pieces because a lot of it can't be shown. And this is the same character drawn 1 year later. So like that's progress. A lot of this makes more sense and is working better. I'm much happier with this drawing than I was with the one a year before, which was me returning kind of out of practice and so on. But it's important to acknowledge that like it's referenced, it's full of ideas. Like this is evocative of this specific photo that Zach took of his fursuit with the spike bat. I was going to do a spike bat too, but I just ultimately just didn't commit to that particular part. But here we have the jacket, the same like pants and like belt and so on. You have the bat, the kind of like overall vibe. Zach made his own fursuit. You'll have recognized Zach in my plush video on the video essay channel, doing that intro horror segment, which he just committed to. I was just like, yeah, can you do like, you got a fursuit and you're kind of creative. Like, it would be fun to just like, can you like pretend to be eating some gore? And I thought he would, I meant like more silly, like just like, you have like a scarf around, you can like kind of like film it in like some low light, just kind of pretend that you're like swallowing this like scarf, and like it just looks like something. he made fake gore and really committed and did a whole, like, did special effects and did way more than I ever expected. But he made his own fursuit, and it's a really fun design. And this is the additional references, like, the part of what goes into this process is, like, trying to find photos or other art and so on that evokes the kind of thing you're going for here. So I was looking up photos of men, like, with different torso positions and so on. Couldn't quite combine, like, I was kind of having to combine ideas and look back and forth between these things, because I wanted a bat behind the head, but I also wanted, like, figuring out, like, raised arms and this kind of part of the anatomy. But then this person's twisting their torso, which is helpful, but then didn't have the rest of the body. This one didn't quite match either, so I just combined two different photos here, just trying to, like, create references, trying to create an idea of what to do here. And this, like, was enough to give me a starting point so I could try to figure out the anatomy and shape of things. That's how I got a lot of what I was doing done there. And it's totally fine to reference things, to reference photos, reference art. You can reference other people's art, just don't trace their art and don't, like, recreate a specific person's art. What I did here is I got a bunch of these different pieces. This is just an incredible drawing that Zach already has of his persona, and I've credited all these so you can see who drew all these. But you have one of just Zach here, then 3 characters in leather jackets, because I just kind of was, like, trying to figure out, how do I draw jackets? How do I draw exposed torsos? And I kind of bounced between all of these and these references, and just kind of got solutions from these people. Like, you're kind of like, it's less, it's less that you're trying to specifically recreate any person's drawing, and you're not tracing anyone's drawing, but you can look at what they did and be like, oh, okay. And I kind of, like, see their solutions for things. Like, for example, this, I think it's a maned wolf or a fox. The creases in the the folds in the jacket, noticing, like, how they kind of expand from, like, the armpit and things like that. Like, there's kind of, like, locations where certain things happen, ways that, like, curved, like, tilted torsos and muscles at that kind of angle might be expressed, and you can use different elements from different ones when you aren't sure what to do. Like, whenever you get stuck, you can look at somebody else's art, or preferably several people's art, so you're not, like, trying to specifically recreate a specific person's drawing. And you can try to interpret the part that you're stuck on and understand why it might be rendered in certain ways and so on. And that's, like, all very helpful stuff to do. So it's part of the process. There's a lot of controversies that come and go when it comes to other people's art. So it's just always important to recognize that, like, you're not, this little pop-up's driving me crazy. I just wanted to be able to have a little mouse, but honestly, I haven't been gesturing at specific things as much as I expected to anyway. It's very important that you do not import somebody else's art into your art and then trace over it or use pieces of it. Like, that's cheating in certain ways, but also kind of disrespectful to the original artist, in that you're using their stuff and passing it off as your own. But it's completely acceptable to be influenced by other people's art and to reference their art and, like, figure out how a bunch of different people drew things as you're learning how to draw it. There's upsides and downsides of that. Everyone is in their own part of their own journey. People have their own, like, hacks and cheats as they go. And so the artists you're looking at themselves have their own bad habits and so on, and you might be learning the wrong things from that. There are more official ways of learning via, like, figure drawing and gesture drawing and taking actual courses and doing a more formalized approach to these things. But at the same time, this thing I was saying at the beginning still applies. You still want to draw, just like anything that makes you draw. So if you're not motivated by practicing in these more abstract ways, which I'm not, like, whenever I try to draw figure drawings and gesture drawings and stuff like that, where I'm just trying to, like, and structure drawings and do stuff just for the sake of practicing, that's very unmotivating to me, because I really want to just make a thing and finish it. I want to make a thing that I can, like, share or be happy about and look back at, and I don't really want to just practice for the sake of it. So I'm making myself practice in my finished drawings, And like that's maybe not ideal, but the fact that I'm drawing at all is better than not drawing. So that's the important thing to some extent. So you know, just be responsible and respectful with your stuff, and don't like recreate anybody's drawings or steal anybody's drawings. But references are absolutely a part of the whole thing. And anyone, you're kneecapping yourself if you try to make yourself learn art from scratch and draw things and never look at things and never look at stuff. Because like observing things is part of being an artist. Like looking at the stuff and figuring out how to interpret this into your own drawing, that's part of the whole thing. You're not supposed to just like imagine it all from scratch and make it all work like that. So don't worry too much about that stuff. But also, like, I got a bit of help here. How should I do this part? I did get a bit of help in this drawing, but maybe we'll get to that part when I get to the part of the video. But I actually, for this particular part, I rendered out the time lapse, so we can see here me drawing from scratch. And so you can see my big messy process here. I'm just sitting here scratching. I have terrible technique. So like I don't really have like skill and proficiency at the particular drawing. Ooh. That's interesting. There we go. It duplicated the picture in a weird way. So you can see from how much I'm scratching everything, I don't really have particular like discipline technique with like the actual like strokes. I don't really know what I'm doing that well. I sometimes feel like I just have taste and that's saving me, and I don't have skill. Like I've been looking at furry art so much for my entire adult life that I just have like an idea of what I want to accomplish with this stuff. But like when you see the actual strokes that I'm doing, it's just a huge mess. And the idea is I just keep going. I just keep drawing, and then I erase it and I draw over it again, and I come up with a new solution and just keep trying to fix it forever. So it's less that I'm good at drawing in the moment and more that I just have like a standard I'm trying to hit, and I'll keep at it until it looks something like what I'm aiming for. This is the sheer amount of brush strokes. These recaps, these replays are always kind of funny because they spend so long in the sketch phase, and that's partly because I spend a long time, but it's also that like it's the time lapse is based on my brush strokes data, so it ends up being so much based on like I spend so much time scratching in this part that this part takes forever in the replay, which is always kind of funny. So I'm actually spending a lot of time on anatomy here, which is funny because I knew I was going to put a jacket on. I somewhat got lost in the idea of drawing the anatomy correctly, but also it's like it's good practice, and in my head I'm like, if I get the anatomy right, then the body will make sense when I draw the clothing over it. Like the clothing, like I feel like the drawing will make more sense if I figure out the anatomy as best as I can beforehand. So here I am rotating this. I'm like, hang on a minute, this belly and the crotch and so on are gonna be facing to the left, so that needs to be good. That needs to not be facing the way it was. So I'm like redrawing that stuff, and then I hit the point where you can see where I hit the point where I'm like, oh, there has to be a belt line on the pants. The pants need a belt line. I drew the front and back bulges just going up to the edge of the pants, but pants have a belt line, and the belt line is vertical. So I'm like lowering this curve, lowering that curve. I'm like realizing that I need to like, there it goes. I need to actually implement the belt line as I go. And then here I am doing what I said, where I then add a second layer where I try to draw over that. But there's a bit of a story behind this bit, because we have help from somebody on Blue Sky. This was from not you. From With, or Wyth, with probably with WYTH. Sometimes an experienced artist will offer to do a thing called redlining for you, which is where they just take your drawing and they kind of like solve it in a way. They kind of help you figure out what might be going wrong with it. So I sometimes I'll post on Blue Sky just being like, this thing's just a mess. Like I'm iffy on how I'm feeling about this, or particularly, I think I said that like, I was reflecting on the idea of like when you come back and do day 2 of a drawing and you're like, did I make it worse? Which happens sometimes. It's part of the journey. So they're going through and they're adding notes about what could potentially do and like how to express the idea, how to approach the structure of things, which parts should have what level of emphasis, you know, how you structure like the arm and the torso and shifting the body in different ways. And sometimes, and like I'll incorporate some elements from things like this, and sometimes I'll be like, that's interesting to think about, but I don't really necessarily know what to do like with it necessarily. So it can be a mixed bag, but it's definitely like, it's a cool thing that people will offer to do is they'll like go through and sort of like help redo your drawing and things like this. And then that'll give you a thing to reference. Like you still don't import this into your thing and draw over it or anything. You don't like add it in and then like pass in that and treat it as your own art or anything like that. But what you do is you'll see these breakdowns of elements of the stuff, and then you can potentially incorporate those elements into your drawing when you then draw your next sketch. Like you can think about that stuff and it can give you more direction with stuff. And then in this one's case, more than anything else, I really did take in this part, is that I had the head facing forward. It was going to be like facing forward. The head was going to be facing like off to the left, you know, their forward, not our forward. And then the eyes were going to be tilted towards us, maybe the chin raised and so on. But seeing this, it was interesting to consider the idea that like, oh, there's a direction to the energy here of like the pose has an angle to it. And if you tilt the head a certain way, the angle of the head will match the angle of the body, and that kind of creates like a through line for the art. And that was interesting to think about. And so I considered doing exactly that. So from here on out, I end up like reassessing some of the shape of the body, but then I specifically I turn the head towards the camera in this draft, and that becomes like the kind of vibe of what's going on there. It's funny because I keep iterating on like shoulder shapes and stuff like that, and it's very funny because I got so lost in this element of it that I was then forgetting the fact that I was going to ultimately cover it in clothing. And like the notes I received were, this is me struggling to draw a nose and a face. I'm so bad at faces to this day and figuring out like the shape and where it's going to go. At some point I was just like, that's a good end of a nose. And then I just like dragged it off in the distance. I'm once again using the symmetry tool here because I'm like, oh, if I'm going to make the head face the camera, then I can just use the symmetry tool while I draw the shape of the head. But you can see I continuously, I'm like, what are eyes shaped like? What should you go with the eye shape, the overall vibe of the head? Trying to figure out how big ears should be compared to the head and where they should be placed. I'm going to change the shape of the eyes here because I didn't like the particular like angle they were at, so I'm going to end up like shifting them back the other way around. Somebody suggested that the eyes were too high, so I lowered them, got them closer to where the nose level was, and that looks more correct because it's going to be, if the muzzle is pointing up slightly, the eyes should be closer to the muzzle, not higher up, because there's a suggested like shortening of the face there. This is me drawing individual squares, trying to figure out each of the digits of the finger and like how to render those in like 3D spaces as little cubes, because like it's a bunch of separate chunks and they're coming at the camera and they're in front of each other. So you have to deal with both the way that like parts of a finger are in front of other parts of the same finger, but also they're in front of other fingers. And at some point I'm going to drag this nose back over, I think, and be like, let's keep that. But like, I just liked the nose enough, but knew the face was going poorly that I just dragged the nose away to be like, I'll keep that for later in case I want to use that. A helpful thing I'm doing here with my sketching is that I keep switching to different layers and doing each layer in a different color, because then I can not only break the body down into a bunch of different shapes and pieces that I'm solving separately, but I can also then draw overlapping bits without it destroying or being in the way of stuff, so I can then fix like the hand without having to deal with the bat separately and so on. And I'll do this with clothing and anatomy and so on, and elements of the face. You also notice that I switched the arm here because you'll notice that I had a fucked up MC Escher thing going on here, where the arm, this is important, this curve is in front of that curve. That means that the forearm is closer to the camera than the bicep is. But a hand is on the back of the bat, and the bat is supposed to be on the shoulders behind the head, the classic sort of like punk-ass bat pose. This hand is too close to the camera and too big and in front of the bicep, despite being behind the bat that's behind the head. So there's like a perspective break here that's cheating. And every individual element of this almost looks like it makes sense when you zoom in on it, but overall, they combine to make no sense. So by the time we get to this later bit, I'm like, you'll notice that I specifically made it so that the forearm and the bicep are equal to each other, essentially. Neither of them go in front of the other one, because that helps enforce the idea that the arm is stretching like to this direct perpendicular side of the perspective of the camera angle here. Here I'm trying to figure out all the hand bits and so on, which takes a while. And kind of like redraw a bunch of the torso here. Reassess the bulge for the 75th time. It's important. It's important to figure out what the bulge should look like. And drawing some hair. Once again, the thing I talked about before, where I draw the head with the symmetry tool, but then I'd add asymmetrical elements in the case of the hair and so on. And some of these like sides of the head tufts, which I've told you I've already obsessed over too much and never know how to draw. These will have some asymmetrical elements. Here I am adding the clothing over the body in a different color. So the torso is black, the forearms are purple in the line art, but the clothing is this blue color that I'm drawing over everything. And you can keep putting things on new layers and making the previous layers lower opacity to make it so you can still reference them and tell where they are, but also clearly tell where the layer you're working on currently is by making a different color and a different level of opacity. It can all like stand out. You can see it clearly. Here I have the wrinkles and the wobbles here. The wobbles. It's like I'm having the because he's leaning back. The shirt, the top like hangs down and is loose around the torso here, but tight around the arms because this part's not attached. It's unzipped. Drawing a harness here. It's a lot of fun. It's actually nice to add clothing because then you get to hide your fucked up anatomy that you were struggling with, because it's going to be underneath that, and it's more up to interpretation how that part works than having the underwear peak. Drawing some like pants details down here. It's fun when I get to draw the technical stuff sometimes. We get to like really fix it on like, okay, what do pants look like? What's all the weird makeup of the squares of what make it up? Where do the folds go? Because you get a break from the nightmare that is drawing anatomy. Now I've got to draw the tail. And I decided to go back to the previous sketch layer to draw the vague shape of the tail, then go back to the current sketch layer to draw the more refined sketch of the tail, because I went this far without drawing a tail at all. But now I've got a tail, me figuring out how I want to draw the handle, different types of wrapping. And it's going faster here because now I'm making bigger choices. So here I'm drawing the markings of the character and outlining that. And you can see that I do the little little lines here where I'm like, okay, we want to suggest the musculature like I did with that drawing with the Zangief character, where I'm like, you don't want to draw abs, but we want to draw abs. Like you don't want to outline the abs with a bunch of ab outlines, because that looks really cartoonish and hilarious. It looks like a child's idea of a muscular character, but you can like, it also like, it suggests they're way more ripped than this character's supposed to be. But you can draw like these outlines, like, okay, where's the rib cage and where are the abs and the edge of those? Like here's the hip muscle, like the shape of the hip here. So you'll draw different lines that outline these things, but you'll draw them more loose and more sporadic as individual little hashes. And that all comes together to suggest the shapes. I'm trying to figure that stuff out more and more. I did mostly draw the chest as just like a one combined shape, but I think I might lessen that in this inking part, because here I am drawing the outline of everything. Particularly, I think my goal here was to draw in a big, thick layer the outline of everything, and then come back. Yeah, I'm coming back here in a thinner inking brush to do these smaller details with because like this the big outline of everything is thick, and I left all the internal details uninked, and I made the pen thinner, and I'm now going in to fill in all the stuff that I didn't do a minute ago. There's a contrast between these bigger things and these smaller things. Not necessarily the best idea, the best way to implement it ever, but it's like, it's me at least gesturing at the idea and getting it in there. And you can see like a particular, you can see I can see the sketch layer of where the arm is versus where I then had the sleeve hanging outward, and then I add these little dashes kind of like suggesting the difference between like the shirt being like around the bulge of the body versus like sticking out and hanging off, having it be like loose. Importantly, I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. I'm just making shit up and observing how other people draw and iterating on past ideas. You just go. It's just a bunch of problem solving and going. Here we are adding in his colors from his ref sheet and just doing some coloring in general. There are better tools in at least some apps that help with this process. It's kind of a painstaking process of just manually filling in everything carefully in my case, and it's kind of a pain in the ass. But I'm probably using Procreate incorrectly, because I'm so results oriented in that like I want to just like I mean I experiment, I have a process and so on, but I do just want to just work on something. So I don't spend a lot of time researching my app and learning how to do it better as far as like what the capabilities of the app are. I'd kind of do just start drawing something. So there are probably better ways to do some of these things, like coloring things in, that I haven't necessarily fully learned how to do still. This was a fun moment of trying to interpret the markings and realizing which ones I hadn't found yet. Like I added the chest marking to the line art, but stuff like this had not been implemented at all yet. And I was like, I looked at the little hip markings here, and I'm like, these are probably at the belt line or lower, but I raised it a bit because I was like, given the shape of this part of the body, I was like, if I put it in the negative space right here, it'll look really cool there specifically. So I was happy to have that red highlight be between the belt line and the bottom of the crop jacket, and like folding between the shapes of the anatomy here that I already had. Like it just kind of fudging it to be there just made it look really good to me, and I was happy to have that happen. I can't tell what I'm working on right now. There we go. I added it. Oh, I was tempted to add a bigger outline around the outside, and then I was tempted to add more wood grain and couldn't solve how to do that, so I left that blank. But now we're at the shading. And this is just me thinking about it in 3D space and trying to find the underside of stuff. And based on the directionality of the lighting, emphasizing creases and like interior spaces here. It's like the inside of the jacket is darker than the outside of the jacket because that's in shade. Accentuating for certain parts of the anatomy here, like by shading the underside of the body, but then adding a little highlight here for the hip, making the entire it's the way that the bottom bar is in my way. Having the underside so that like the just ass and bulge have a top and a bottom side, so that the part that's pointing at the camera and below the bottom half of the curve gets darker, suggesting the shape of that stuff. Having this part here suggests that the pockets are like sticking in because pockets are deeper than the rest of the pants, and that kind of all comes together. The shading really kind of helps things look right. The face finally makes more sense because we can kind of specify that this is the underside of the muzzle, and like so it's like this part is brighter and the edge of the neck is brighter, but then the underside of the chin and the other side of the muzzle facing away from the light, like that gets darker. There's darkness under the ears. You always want to have like, you just kind of add for the reflectiveness of metal, you just kind of add like a cone of darkness in the middle of the metal to make it look right. Jewelry is kind of like, it's interesting. There's like kind of like a little cheat of like adding that little cone there for the curvature, like really makes it look right. Add a little bit of eye shine, some little highlights here and there. I wanted to just add individual strokes and not over obsess with the jacket, where I just had like this streak here is like a reflectiveness that suggests the texture of the jacket. And then here I was like, maybe I'll add this like lime green outline. Did not keep it, but you could just experiment with that stuff because it's non-destructive. Just add layers and go. Ultimately, I just landed on the idea of emphasizing the character by adding a vignette around the outside. So there's darkened corners and outline, which leaves the inside a brighter color, which makes the character pop a little bit more, and it's also a color chosen to contrast the fur color specifically. And that's the finished piece. It's looping, I guess. Oh, it's probably because I clicked, yeah. So that's the finished piece. Pretty happy with that, yeah. I have a long way to go, but that's just part of the fun. Draw characters you like, draw scenarios you like, and just have fun. Just start drawing. You just do it. Draw fan art, be shamelessly indulgent, draw whatever concept or thing you obsess over, and just go. And it's fun. And it's also like, it's a good way to meet people. It's fun to just like, one, it's just fun to like draw your friends for their birthdays or based on inside jokes or things like that. But people will enjoy your art, and everyone in the furry fandom, or a lot of people in the furry fandom, are just like really they're a bunch of nerds. Everyone's a big so many people are just these big introverted nerds that don't know how to talk to people or when to talk to people. And so like you'll actually be surprised by how much sometimes the artists that you like take an interest in you just because you're drawing, and then you both just like each other's drawings, and that's just like a conversation starter of its own right. And that's kind of like its own cool part of how the fandom works. And sometimes people act like there's cliques in the fandom and pop-you-furs that all know each other, and I'm like, it's just a bunch of artists that like each other's art. That's all it is. It's an art-focused fandom, and so people like the art that's in it, and people just like spend time on Blue Sky and so on, and just like browse art and share each other's art all day. That's just the process, and it's that easy to participate. You just start drawing and just go, and everyone has their own journey. You could progress faster than I did if you just really grind at it, because like I don't draw that often. I'm often lucky to get one drawing done a month, which is not great for practice. I do feel like I've had pretty good progress for how infrequently I draw, but I think it's because that's maybe just because I've looked at art so much that I've thought about it a lot. So even if my technique's not there, I have like a goal that I'm working towards. But really, like there's not necessarily an objective quality level. It's like you have your own goals, your own standards you're going for, and if you're happy with it, you're happy with it, and just kind of like try to chase that and figure out where that is. And you could just start. I just started with pencils. Just get a pencil. You can get a pencil set, and that gives you some more tools to play with different like brightnesses and so on, so you can do sketch layers and so on. But you can also just grab a number 2 pencil and some like printer paper or whatever paper, and just kind of like go to town and start practicing. And that's really the best way to start, I think, is that you have like really low stakes and you just start going for it. And then if you realize you are invested and you are sticking with it, then you can like think about like, okay, is it worth the investment to get this or that supplies, or get a device that lets me draw digitally and so on? Or do I just keep drawing with this pencil and taking photos of it with my phone? There are people who just draw with pencils, or maybe a Sharpie sometimes for inking. Like they draw with like pens, pencils, pens, and markers, and they just do that. And they take a picture with their phone. And they just go. Something that I found interesting is that a while back, there was somebody who got caught using AI, and they were like, "You guys are being this comes up a lot. Of people will often be like, you're this is classist." Basically, they'll try to use like social justice language to justify their AI usage, and be like, "You guys are gatekeeping. You guys don't understand how hard it is to afford all this stuff you need to draw and so on. Like, all I have is a mouse. This is all I can do, so I have to use AI." And that specificity of that being like, "Oh, all I have is a mouse." that just had all the artists come out of the woodwork that were like, hey, this is my art. This is how good I do. I take commissions and stuff. I do this professionally. I draw with a mouse. A surprising number of people just draw with their computer mouse, and they just draw, and it seems so unwieldy and weird, but every approach to drawing you can do is just muscle memory. It's just practice. You get used to your tool, and then you just go. And so, like, I think about like for example, like Higgs Figs, somebody that I commissioned. A lot of the artists I say are NSFW. Look up at your own risk. He had such a cool art style and like take on anatomy and in particular way of drawing characters that was very fun. And then he was like, hey, I'm finally getting a drawing tablet like last year, like after I'd already commissioned him and so on. Like he was just drawing with a mouse like for years. And like no one was like, this looks like a mouse drawing. Hexacult, who does is doing our art for the next season of Null-Playing Games for Shattered Grail, does a lot of pixel art, and he just does it all with his mouse, and he draws a lot of other things just with his mouse, and he even will do art that is with a mouse and it's on one layer, just is a digital painting with his mouse on one layer, and they look great. And like there is no specific tool you need, there is no specific technique you need. You don't need a million layers. You don't need to have in traditional terms, you don't need like transparencies and a light table to like do inking over your stuff. Like you can just work with the bare minimum and accomplish really cool stuff just from dedication and practice and just getting used to your particular tools. And that's where some of the style comes from, is from limitations for people and just what their preferences are, how they problem solve. Everybody has their own art style. I was wondering what mine would be or what things would look like, and it'll evolve, but like my drawings have recognizably become my drawings at some point. Like you start noticing a through line with these things a bit, and that's interesting. It's like you have your own style that you can also bring to the world, and we won't know what it is until you start drawing and discover it on the fly and then evolve it and go, and you just do it. You just draw. I thought this would be a fun thing to throw at the furry audience. This video was supposed to have a bit more of a direction to it and be a bit less rambly, and it kind of became this huge thing. I probably incorporated too many things into my slideshow, but maybe seeing all of that in its totality, that 3-year journey of the evolving stuff, maybe hopefully that meant something and was helpful in some way. Because like that just, I don't know, I just did it. I just started doing it. I just juggled that with my other jobs and was like, I just want to draw. Maybe like once a week or once a month, and just like cool down and hang out and just choose to just enjoy that space and that practice and that process. And committing to the process is a lot of fun. Seeing what comes out of it is a lot of fun. It's fulfilling that the thing that you make is part of you and so on, and like experiencing that is cool. Just it's good to create. And if for furries, which many people watching this are, you're used to engaging and seeing so much art, and it can feel separate from you. And I want to highlight how much that's not separate from you. It can just be you. You can also just make art. You can just start and just do it. Not universal. I'm sure someone will be like, I work 17 jobs and I never sleep, so I can't ever draw because my life's on fire. And I get it. But like, I'm just saying, like, it's not mystical. It's not magic. It's not. People talk about like people are so talented and like artists are magic, and it's like, and I hear that all the time. And I'm like, no, you can just draw. You can just start doing it, and it won't be the same for everyone. It's not the same journey for everyone. It's not the same difficulty curve and progression. People just think about stuff differently. They process things differently, and then they have different levels of patience, and they're different levels of critical thinking and like self-criticizing and critique and analysis there for how to change and adapt as they go. So everyone will have their own journey there, but you can just do it. So give it a go. I'm gonna call it a day here. I've been rambling for way too long. I have other stuff I want to work on today. Whoops. Accidentally procrastinating on my video essay right now. So I'm gonna go back to that and get dinner. But thanks for watching, guys. This has been a long one, and I'll see you next time.